Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another scary story, your place where we uncover the darkest mysteries in a calming and reflective way. For the next hour, I want you to put on your earphones, put your phone face down, and close your eyes. Relax and let this story take you to a world full of chills and mystery. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. Now, get comfortable and relax. I told myself it was just a job. Minimum wage, overnight hours, a place to disappear. That's what I needed. The Dollar Tree sat in a dying strip mall, wedged between a laundromat with flickering lights and a payday loan place that had gone out of business months ago. No customers, no questions, just me and the shelves. The manager, Glenn, barely looked at me when he handed over the keys and the schedule. "Stock fast, don't steal, and don't call me unless the place burns down," he muttered, shoving a paper at me. His breath smelled like cigarettes and stale coffee. I didn't argue. I just wanted to work, get paid, and forget why I'd come here. The store was empty when I locked the doors behind me, just the hum of the old freezer in the back and the rows of two bright fluorescent lights. I clocked in on the ancient computer, the screen flickering, and then pushed my cart into the stockroom. That's when I noticed the first thing that was off. The shipment was wrong. There were extra boxes, a lot of them, more than should have fit on the truck, and none of them were labeled. Just brown cardboard, stacked in the corner like someone had been in a hurry. I checked the manifest. Canned food, off-brand chips, cleaning supplies. Nothing that explained the unmarked boxes. I hesitated. Opening product that wasn't on the list was a good way to get fired. But something about them felt wrong. I slit the tape on the nearest one. Inside, there were old dolls, not Dollar Tree dolls, the cheap plastic ones kids barely looked at before tossing them in a cart. These were porcelain, expensive, but cracked, dirty. Their painted eyes faded like they'd been staring at something for too long. A faint, musty smell curled up from the box. I swallowed hard and checked another. Children's shoes, small, scuffed, and dusty, like they'd been stored in an attic for years. A third box had VHS tapes, no labels, just blank black plastic with the reels visible through the tiny windows. Something crawled up the back of my neck. I shoved the boxes aside and focused on my actual job, stacking cans of soup onto the shelves. The old AC unit rattled in the ceiling. The Dollar Tree radio played static. I forced myself to breathe. At 2:47 a.m., I found the first note. It was tucked behind a can of peas, just a torn piece of paper folded in half. The handwriting was small and spidery, pressed so hard into the paper that it left indentations. Asterisk, asterisk. I saw what you did, dot asterisk, asterisk. I stared at it, heart hammering. It wasn't possible. No one knew me here. No one knew why I'd left my last job, why I took the first thing I could find with no questions asked. I shoved the note into my pocket. Probably some kid messing around, I told myself. A prank. Maybe even a coincidence. At 3:12 a.m., I heard footsteps in the aisles. I froze. The store was locked. No one could have come in. But the sound was unmistakable. Soft steps, slow and deliberate, moving past the greeting cards. I gripped the box cutter in my pocket and stepped out of the stockroom. The aisles stretched out in front of me, empty. The only movement was the slight flicker of the overhead lights. "Hello?" My voice barely carried. Silence. I swallowed and turned back. The moment my hand touched the stockroom door, the crying started. It was faint, distant, like it was coming from beneath the floor. There was no basement in the Dollar Tree. I ran. The crying stopped the moment I stepped into the stockroom. I stood there, my breath too loud, my heart slamming against my ribs. The air felt heavy, like something had just left the room. The stacked boxes loomed in the dim light, their contents now an afterthought compared to the sound I'd just heard. I pulled out my phone and checked the store layout again. No basement, no cellar, just cheap tile floors and old foundation. But I knew what I heard. A sound like that doesn't just come from nowhere. I told myself I'd imagined it, sleep deprivation, a trick of the old ventilation system. But my hands were shaking as I grabbed another box, forcing myself back to work. At 3:35 a.m., the security monitor glitched. I wasn't watching it at first. The old black and white screen sat in the back corner of the stockroom, playing a grainy feed of the store. I only noticed when the static started creeping in, the picture breaking apart into white lines. Then the movement caught my eye. A shadow in aisle 3. It flickered in and out, the distortion making it impossible to tell what I was looking at. The shape wasn't solid. It wavered like bad reception, like it was phasing in and out of the camera's view, but it was moving. And then it stopped, right in front of the security camera, staring at it. Not staring, facing it, because the figure didn't have a face. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the stack of unopened boxes. The static thickened, swallowing the screen for a full second. When the image came back, it was gone. The aisles were empty. I couldn't breathe. The store was locked. No one had come in or out. I should have been alone. But the footage told a different story. I grabbed my box cutter, gripping it hard enough to make my knuckles ache, and stepped toward the stockroom door. The cheap plastic handle was slick in my sweaty palm as I turned it. The store stretched out in front of me, silent. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly like they always did. Aisle 3 was 10 feet away. I forced myself forward. The shelves were undisturbed. Rows of canned vegetables, stacks of generic cereal, a few Halloween decorations that had been marked down weeks ago. Nothing looked out of place. But I could still feel it, the sensation of being watched. I swallowed hard and turned toward the security mirror at the end of the aisle. The curved glass was meant to deter shoplifters, reflecting the space behind me. I shouldn't have looked. The moment I met my own reflection, I saw it. A figure behind me, not a customer, not a person. Something tall and thin, standing just at the edge of the aisle, where my shadow stretched too long under the flickering light. It didn't have features, just a dark, shifting shape, like it was made of static pulled from the security feed. I spun around. Nothing. The aisle was empty. I turned back to the mirror, but the shape was gone. I told myself I was seeing things. The screen was old, the mirror was warped, my brain was running on bad gas station coffee and exhaustion. But I knew that wasn't true, because the moment I stepped away, something whispered my name. Not out loud, not in the store, through the security speakers. A burst of static, a voice cutting through the dead air. Low, faint, right against my ear, saying my name. I ran back to the stockroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I stood there, chest heaving, the sound of my pulse thudding in my skull. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out, my fingers clumsy against the screen. I hit the call button. Glenn answered on the third ring. What? His voice was groggy, irritated. I forced myself to sound normal. Hey, has anyone else ever... I swallowed. Has anyone else ever mentioned weird things happening during night shifts? Silence, a long, heavy pause. Then Glenn sighed. You found the boxes, didn't you? I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my pulse hammering. Glenn's words hung there, thick and heavy. He didn't sound surprised, didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. What do you mean? My voice came out too thin, too breathless. Another pause, then a long sigh. You're not gonna quit, are you? The question threw me, the way he asked it, like this had happened before. Like he'd had this conversation before. I swallowed hard. What's in the boxes, Glenn? He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Nothing you want to mess with. A chill crawled up my spine. But they keep showing up. Yeah, he said, his voice flat. They do. I turned toward the stockroom. The unmarked boxes loomed in the corner, their contents suddenly so much worse now that I knew Glenn had been expecting them. You don't open them, he said like he could hear me thinking. Too late for that. The radio out front crackled, the same burst of static I'd heard earlier. A voice under the noise, too faint to catch. I gripped the phone tighter. What happens if I do? Glenn exhaled sharply. You start seeing things. My stomach lurched. The security cameras glitched, I said before I could stop myself. I saw someone. Yeah, he muttered. That happens too. The fluorescent light in the stockroom flickered. A quiet click echoed from the front of the store. The sound of the time clock. Someone had punched in. I stiffened. My shift was the only one running. The doors were locked. I was alone. I turned toward the old security screen. The camera feed still crackled with static, but I could see the front register, the time clock, and a new name on the screen. An extra employee. Glenn was still talking, but I barely heard him. My feet carried me toward the monitor, heart pounding. I squinted at the name. The letters were distorted, the text half scrambled, like the machine couldn't fully register it. But the timestamp was clear, 3:47 a.m. Someone had just clocked in. The radio crackled again. The crying was back, not under the floor this time. Closer, just outside the stockroom door. I barely registered hanging up on Glenn. My body moved on autopilot, my hand trembling as I reached for the door handle. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence, then a breath, right on the other side, slow, wet, shuddering. The handle turned under my fingers. I yanked my hand back as the door creaked open an inch. Just enough for the fluorescent light from the store to bleed into the dim stockroom. Just enough to see the shadow on the other side. Not a person, too tall, too thin. The same shifting darkness I'd seen on the security feed, standing just outside the stockroom. The door creaked again, opening wider, a single hand curled around the edge, long fingers, too many joints. The breath on the other side hitched, like a child suppressing a sob. Then a voice, low, fragile. I know what you did. I shoved the door shut so hard the whole frame rattled. My own breathing was too loud, too uneven. I scrambled back, heart slamming into my throat. I needed to get out. But the doors didn't unlock until morning. I backed away from the door, my pulse thudding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. My hands fumbled for my phone, but my fingers were slick with sweat, and it nearly slipped from my grasp. My breathing came too fast, too shallow. The door rattled once, just once, then nothing. Silence. I forced myself to move. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, one of the heavy box cutters from the supply shelf, and gripped it so tight my knuckles ached. I wasn't about to just stand there and wait for whatever was outside that door to come back. I needed answers. The time clock still showed the extra punch-in. A fake name scrambled by whatever was wrong with this place, but the system had logged it. I didn't know how that was possible. No one had walked in. The doors were locked. But someone or something was here with me. I checked the security monitor again. Aisle 5. Movement. It was subtle. A slight shift of the shelves, like someone had brushed past them. A flicker of static from the camera. But there was something else. The VHS tapes. The unmarked ones from the shipment. They weren't in the box anymore. They were stacked neatly on the floor, lined up in a perfect row in the middle of the aisle. I hadn't touched them. The lights flickered again. The radio let out a burst of static. Then, laughter. Not the soft, innocent kind. Something dry and distant, like a record spinning at the wrong speed. I had to see what was on those tapes. I grabbed the nearest one and turned it over in my hands. No label, no markings, just the weight of something old. Something that had been stored away for too long. My eyes flicked to the office door. There was an old TV in there. I moved fast, my shoes squeaking against the tile, as I rushed toward the office. The tiny room smelled like stale coffee and dust, the walls covered in curling papers no one had bothered to replace in years. A relic of a store barely clinging to life. The TV sat in the corner, a built-in VCR below the screen. My hands shook as I pushed the tape in. The machine swallowed it with a soft click, the screen flickering to life. For a moment, just static. Then an image, a security feed, just like the one in the stockroom, the same aisles, the same shelves. But the footage was old, grainy, the timestamp in the corner unreadable. I leaned closer. A person appeared on the screen. A woman. She wore the old Dollar Tree uniform, the logo slightly different than the one on my shirt. Her back was turned to the camera as she stocked shelves, moving methodically, just like I had earlier. Then something shifted behind her. A shape in the next aisle. Not a customer. Something wrong, tall, thin, blurred at the edges like the camera couldn't fully capture it. I watched, heart in my throat. As the woman hesitated, she straightened, sensing something behind her. But she didn't turn around. She didn't get the chance. The screen flickered, the tape warped, the woman's body bent unnaturally. Her spine arched back at a sickening angle, her mouth stretching open in a silent scream. Then the screen cut to static. The VCR whined, the tape jammed, the machine spat it back out, the film inside tangled and ruined. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching. The time clock beeped, another punch in, another name. The office door creaked open behind me. The door creaked wider, inch by inch, until it stopped just short of fully opening. My breath hitched. The room felt smaller, the air too thick to swallow. I turned slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. Nothing. Just the open stockroom beyond the office door, shelves casting long shadows under the buzzing fluorescent lights. The air conditioner groaned to life, rattling in the ceiling, but it wasn't loud enough to cover the sound that came next. A footstep, then another, soft, measured, moving toward me from an aisle I couldn't see. I gripped the desk behind me, my fingers digging into the rough particle board, grounding myself. My eyes flicked to the security screen. A figure stood in the front aisle, near the checkout counter. It wasn't moving, it was just there, waiting. I swallowed hard and stepped out of the office. The store stretched out in front of me. Rows of dollar store merchandise bathed in artificial light. The register stood at the far end, the time clock beside it still glowing, the extra punch-ins stacked on the screen like a list of ghosts. And the figure. It stood just past the counter, still as stone. It wasn't fully solid. It flickered at the edges like bad reception on an old TV. It was taller than it should have been, its limbs too long, its posture unnaturally stiff. It didn't have a face, just a blank, shifting void where its features should be. But it was watching me. I knew it without question. A long breath shuddered from its body, the sound crawling over my skin. It raised one hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed at me. My stomach twisted. I backed up a step. The lights flickered. Aisle 3 rustled. Another figure stepped into view. Then another, shapes moving between the shelves. Silent, watching. The store was full of them. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. There was nowhere to go. The doors were still locked. The stockroom was a dead end. But my body moved on instinct, my feet slamming against the tile as I sprinted for the break room at the back of the store. Something moved in the aisles beside me, keeping pace. The air felt thick, like wading through something invisible. My lungs burned, my vision blurred at the edges. The break room door was only a few steps away. I grabbed the handle. A cold hand landed on my shoulder. The world tilted. For a second, everything went black. Then, a beep. Bright lights, a monitor screen in front of me. The time clock, the extra punch-ins were gone. Just one name remained on the screen. Mine. I turned. The store was empty. The shelves were neatly stocked. The security cameras hummed quietly, their feeds clear and crisp. The radio played some tinny pop song. It was morning. Sunlight streamed in through the front windows. The doors were unlocked. I was still standing there, frozen, when Glenn walked in. He barely glanced at me as he tossed his keys onto the counter and clocked in. "You stayed late," he muttered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Not a bad first shift." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Glenn stretched and yawned. "You coming in tonight?" I turned back to the time clock. My name glowed on the screen. It said I had just clocked in, not out. I swallowed hard. Something was still here, still waiting, still watching. I forced a smile. "Yeah," I said, "I'll be here." I never believed in curses, not in the way my grandmother did, with her whispered superstitions and the way she used to touch the wooden frame of old family portraits before walking past them. "Pictures hold things," she'd say. "Memories, spirits. You be careful what you hang on your walls." I should have listened. The painting arrived on a Thursday. I remember because it was the first truly cold night of the season, the kind that made the wind sound like a distant scream through the alleyways. I had been browsing an old antique shop earlier that day, the kind crammed full of forgotten things. brass clocks that no longer ticked, faded photographs of strangers, porcelain dolls with eyes that never quite met your own. And then there it was, the crying boy. I hadn't gone looking for it. I hadn't even known about the stories surrounding it. But something about it caught me, held me. A painting of a young boy, his face streaked with a single tear, his eyes hollow with sadness. It wasn't the kind of thing I'd normally be drawn to, but there was something hauntingly real about it. The artist had captured more than just sorrow. He had trapped something deeper, something heavy. I wouldn't, the shopkeeper had said, as he wrapped it up, his voice flat. It's one of those paintings. I had laughed it off. One of those? He didn't laugh. You'll see. That night, I hung it in my apartment. Not because I loved it, not even because it matched anything, but because something about it felt familiar. Like I had seen that face before, somewhere in a dream, or a half-forgotten memory. The moment I stepped back, admiring how it looked above my desk, the power flickered. Just for a second, I told myself it was a coincidence. By midnight, the air in my apartment had changed. It wasn't anything I could explain, just a shift like the walls had stretched further apart, like the silence had thickened into something solid. Then, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the smell of smoke. It was faint at first, like someone had just blown out a candle. But as I sat up, my throat tightened. It was stronger now, acrid, filling the room. I threw off the blankets, heart hammering, and ran for the door. The hallway was clear, no flames, no heat. Just the thick, unmistakable scent of something burning. Then, just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. No smoke, no fire, nothing. I checked the stove, the outlets, every single appliance in the apartment. Nothing had been left on. There was no reason for that smell. But when I turned back toward my bedroom, something felt wrong. The air was colder, the shadows felt deeper, and the painting, the one I had hung just hours before, was no longer on the wall. It was on the floor, face down. I told myself it must have fallen. Maybe the nail hadn't been strong enough. Maybe I hadn't secured it properly. But when I picked it up, the hook on the back was still intact. The nail in the wall was still firm. The painting hadn't just fallen. It had been taken down. That's when I saw it, the tear on the boy's face. I could have sworn it was in a different place than before. I didn't sleep after that. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Just a trick of my tired mind. I had been working too much, spending too many late nights staring at screens. Maybe my brain was making things up, twisting shadows into stories. That's all it was. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The apartment felt different. The walls seemed to breathe with me, expanding and contracting in ways I couldn't quite explain. Every creak in the old wood floors felt heavier, more deliberate, like someone was moving just out of sight. I propped the painting against the wall, facing away from me, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I was still awake when the sun bled through the blinds, too tired to think, too restless to close my eyes. By the afternoon, I'd convinced myself it was silly to be afraid of a picture. It's just paint on canvas. I told myself that again, as I hung it back on the wall, hammering the nail in harder this time, making sure it wouldn't fall. I forced myself to look at it, really look. The boy's eyes. They weren't just sad, they were pleading. I shook the thought away and left for work. By the time I got home that night, something had changed. The smell hit me the second I unlocked the door. Smoke. Not the faint, lingering scent from the night before. This was stronger, heavier. I froze in the doorway, stomach twisting, my fingers tightening on the strap of my bag. My eyes darted around, searching for the source. The kitchen was fine, no open flames, no charred countertops. I moved room by room, checking everything. Nothing was burning, nothing was even warm. But the smell was still there, thick, oily, coating my throat like I had been, and breathing it in for hours. I followed it back to my bedroom. The painting was on the floor again, face down. I swallowed hard, a sharp prickle of unease skittering down my spine. My hands trembled as I reached for it, turning it over. The boy's face stared up at me. The tear on his cheek looked fresh. I dropped it. The frame hit the floor with a dull thud. My skin felt too tight, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. This wasn't just a coincidence. I wasn't imagining things. Something was wrong. A sharp crack split the air. I spun around just in time to see the light bulb in my bedside lamp shatter, raining tiny shards onto the nightstand. The room plunged into darkness, except for the sickly glow of the streetlights outside. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, not words, just the sound of breath moving in the dark, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The smell of smoke thickened. My lungs tightened. My body screamed at me to run, to leave, but I couldn't move. I could only stand there, frozen, as the air in the room grew hotter. Then, in the corner of my eye, something shifted. The darkness near my closet stretched, bending unnaturally, like a shadow pulling itself free from the walls. Something was in here with me, and it was watching. I grabbed the painting and ran. I didn't stop running until I was outside. The cold air hit me like a slap, shocking my lungs back into working order. My heart was still hammering, my fingers locked around the frame of the painting, gripping it so tightly that my knuckles ached. My apartment loomed behind me, windows dark, the weight of something unseen pressing against the walls. I didn't go back inside, not that night. Instead, I sat in my car, staring at the building, my breath fogging up the windshield, as I tried to convince myself that none of it was real. That I was exhausted, that stress and lack of sleep were making me hallucinate. But I knew better. I could still smell the smoke clinging to my clothes. I needed answers. I pulled out my phone and started searching. Asterisk, asterisk. The crying boy painting dot asterisk, asterisk. The results loaded instantly. My stomach knotted as I scrolled through article after article, all saying the same thing. The painting was cursed, house fires and strange occurrences, reports of the artwork being found untouched in the ashes of homes that had burned to the ground. Firefighters refusing to keep them, families throwing them away, only to have them mysteriously reappear. A name jumped out at me, Don Bonillo, a boy who had supposedly survived a fire that killed his parents. A boy who had been passed from place to place, never speaking, never staying anywhere for long. Fires always seemed to follow him. Villagers whispered that he was cursed. The painter, Franco Seville, had taken him in. Then Seville's studio had burned down. The boy vanished. Some claimed he had died years later in a car fire, reduced to nothing but bone and ash. Others believed he was still out there, moving from place to place, finding new homes, new people, and always bringing the flames with him. My hands tightened around the painting. I didn't want it anywhere near me. I stepped out of the car, breathing fast, and carried it to the dumpster behind my building. The alley was empty, the silence pressing down on me like a held breath. My fingers dug into the frame as I hesitated. It felt wrong to throw it away. But keeping it was worse. I took one last look at the boy's face, at the endless sorrow in his painted eyes, then hurled the picture into the dumpster. It landed with a dull thud against the trash bags. I turned and walked away, forcing myself not to look back. By the time I finally went back inside, the smell of smoke had faded. The apartment felt normal again. I told myself it was over, that I'd gotten rid of it, that I was safe. But the next morning, when I stepped outside, the painting was sitting on my doorstep, and the edges of the frame were burnt. I stared at the painting on my doorstep, my stomach twisting into knots. The edges of the frame were charred, blackened as if they'd been licked by flames. But the canvas itself, the boy's sorrowful face, the single tear, was untouched. My breath came too fast, too uneven. This wasn't possible. I had thrown it away. I had seen it land in the dumpster, heard the hollow thud as it hit the trash. But it was here, waiting. A car door slammed down the street, snapping me out of my daze. My neighbor, Mrs. Connors, was unloading groceries from her trunk, oblivious to the nightmare sitting at my feet. I forced myself to move, to act normal. I grabbed the painting and carried it inside, my fingers itching where they touched the burned wood. The smell of smoke followed me. I didn't hang it back on the wall. I didn't even put it down. I walked straight to the sink, turned on the water, and shoved the canvas under the stream. The icy flow rushed over the paint, soaking the fabric, making it sag. But nothing changed. The paint didn't run. The image didn't blur. The boy's face remained, watching me through the water. My stomach flipped. I yanked it from the sink, my wet hands trembling. The canvas should have been ruined. The colors should have bled. The paper backing should have softened and torn. But it was untouched. I was shaking now. I grabbed my keys and left. I drove without thinking, hands gripping the wheel too tight, breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. My mind raced through every possibility. Maybe someone had pulled it from the dumpster and returned it as a joke. Maybe I had imagined throwing it away in the first place. But I knew the truth. This thing wasn't normal. I pulled into the library parking lot, my fingers numb as I turned off the engine. If I couldn't destroy it, I could at least understand it. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, the smell of old paper and dust settling around me like a familiar blanket. I walked straight to the reference section, heart hammering, and pulled every book I could find on cursed objects, haunted paintings, unexplained fires. I spent hours flipping through pages, scanning paragraphs, chasing every thread of information I could find. The crying boy was well known, too well known. House fires across Europe, all with the same painting found untouched in the wreckage. Some families had reported hearing whispers in the night. Others had woken to the smell of smoke long before the flames had started. No one who owned the painting kept it for long. They tried to throw it away, burn it, destroy it, but it always came back. My throat felt dry. I rubbed at my eyes, exhaustion pressing down on me. I needed to get rid of it. For good. I slammed the book shut and left. The sun had started to set, casting long golden streaks across the sky. I drove back home fast, my mind made up. This time, I wouldn't just throw it away. I would burn it myself. When I reached my apartment, the smell of smoke hit me before I even stepped inside. My stomach lurched. Something was wrong. The second I opened the door, heat rushed out to meet me. The air was thick, suffocating. My chest tightened. As I stumbled forward, eyes scanning frantically, the walls were scorched, blackened handprints smeared across the ceiling. And in the center of the room, sitting exactly where I had left it, the crying boy painting, perfect, untouched. The fire had come. And it wasn't finished. I couldn't move. The apartment was ruined. The walls were streaked with soot. The ceiling warped and stained black. The air was thick with the acrid bite of burned wood, but nothing was actually on fire. Nothing except the memory of it, lingering in the air like a warning. And in the middle of it all, the painting sat untouched. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was done being afraid. I grabbed it with both hands, the frame still warm under my fingers, and stormed out of the apartment. My lungs burned as I stepped into the night, my feet carrying me without thought, without hesitation. I was going to end this. I drove. Miles blurred together, the city shrinking behind me as I pushed forward, deeper into the dark. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from everything, from buildings, from people. I found myself in an empty clearing near the outskirts of town, an old service road, leading to a stretch of abandoned land. There was nothing here, just dry earth and sky. It was perfect. I threw the painting onto the ground and stepped back, my heart pounding. My hands shook as I pulled the lighter from my pocket. One flick, the flame bloomed, small but steady. I hesitated only for a second before touching it to the corner of the canvas. The fire caught immediately. I watched as the flames licked at the edges, curling the frame, turning the sorrowful face of the boy to smoke and ash. The heat flared higher, brighter, hotter than it should have. The air around me trembled, the ground felt unsteady. And then I heard it. A voice, not a whisper this time, not the soft, shuddering breath from before. A child's voice, screaming. It came from everywhere at once, a wail of agony and rage, splitting the night apart. The fire roared, the flames stretching unnaturally high, twisting, writhing, forming shapes that almost looked like hands clawing their way out. I stumbled back, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The sound was unbearable, the heat suffocating. The fire should have burned out by now, should have been reduced to smoldering embers, but it only grew, brighter, hungrier. Then all at once, silence. The flames vanished. The night swallowed the sound. The painting was gone. Only ash remained, scattered by the wind, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, breathless, my skin damp with sweat. It was over. It had to be. I left the clearing without looking back. I drove home in silence, half expecting my apartment to be gone, reduced to cinders. But it was still there, smoke-stained but standing. The air was lighter. The walls didn't feel like they were closing in. For the first time in days, I slept. Morning came. Sunlight filtered through the windows, soft and warm. I got up, moved through my apartment, like a man shaking off a dream. The burn marks were still there, the damage real, but the weight in the air was gone. No whispers, no shadows, no scent of smoke. It was over. At least, that's what I thought. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I caught something in the corner of my eye. A smudge on the mirror, faint but there. I stepped closer. The glass was streaked with soot, and in the center of it, as if traced by a child's hand, a single tear. The first knock was loud enough to cut through the sound of running water. Beatrice flinched, fingers still tangled in her shampooed hair, blinking against the sting of soap in her eyes. For a moment she thought she had imagined it, just the pipes settling, or maybe a neighbor slamming a door. Then it came again. Knock, 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 knock. 5 sharp raps against the front door. She groaned, shaking the water from her face. Peter, the idiot, had shown up early. He had probably forgotten that she always left her door unlocked when she was home. "Come in," she called, voice bouncing off the tiled walls. No response. A few seconds passed. The sound of the shower filled the silence. Beatrice rolled her eyes. Maybe he hadn't heard. "It's open," she shouted again. "Just let yourself in." Nothing. Annoyance prickled at her. Peter was messing with her. He had always been that way. Playing dumb little pranks, trying to get a reaction. Beatrice turned her back to the door, rinsing the last of the shampoo from her hair. Then, knock, 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 knock. Harder this time. More urgent. Beatrice's breath hitched. Something felt off. The knocks weren't playful. They weren't teasing. They sounded wrong. She shut the water off, skin prickling in the sudden silence. The apartment was small. Just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a tiny living space, so the front door wasn't far. But she hesitated, water dripping from her fingertips, a knot of unease tightening in her chest. Her phone rang. She jumped, heart hammering, before realizing it was just the ringtone. Muffled, coming from the bathroom sink where she had left it. She grabbed a towel, wrapping it around herself as she reached for the phone. Peter. She swiped to answer, still irritated. "I'm in the shower, you moron. Why don't you stop knocking and just come in?" There was silence on the other end. Then, "Don't open the door." The words were whispered, tight with urgency. Beatrice frowned. "What?" "I'm outside your building," Peter's voice came again, barely above a breath. "I just saw someone go up the stairs to your apartment." Beatrice's mouth went dry. A slow, cold dread crept through her limbs. Her voice caught. "What did you mean?" A pause, then quieter. She wasn't walking. The air in the bathroom seemed to press in around her, thick and suffocating. Peter's breathing was shaky. "She was crawling," he whispered, "up the wall, on all fours. Knock, 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 knock." This time the sound didn't come from the front door. It came from inside the apartment. Beatrice couldn't breathe. The knocking had moved. It wasn't at the front door anymore. It was inside, somewhere closer. Her grip on the phone tightened. "Peter," she whispered, barely able to get the word out. "Are you sure you're outside?" A pause, then, "Yes." Her stomach dropped. The knocking came again. Knock, 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 knock. Not from the door, not from the walls, from the ceiling, directly above her. Beatrice's entire body locked up. She didn't want to look. Every part of her brain screamed, "Don't look, asterisk. Don't move, asterisk. Don't breathe, asterisk." But she couldn't stop herself. Her gaze drifted upward. The ceiling was covered in condensation from the hot shower, droplets of water clinging to the surface like sweat. But something else was there. A shape. A figure pressed against the ceiling, arms bent at unnatural angles, fingers splayed wide, hair hanging down like thick, wet ropes. It wasn't just asterisk on asterisk, the ceiling. It was asterisk, asterisk, crawling, asterisk, asterisk across it. Beatrice choked on a breath, stumbling backward. The figure shifted, its head turning toward her in a slow, awful motion, though its body remained pressed to the ceiling. Its face wasn't right. The skin looked stretched, mouth too wide, lips trembling, as if whispering something she couldn't hear. Its eyes, dark, bottomless, locked onto hers. And then it started moving, faster than it should have been able to. Beatrice bolted. She crashed through the bathroom door, the towel slipping from her grasp as she ran, bare feet slapping against the floor. The apartment felt warped, the air thick with something unseen. She barely registered Peter's voice still coming through the phone. B asterisk asterisk Beatrice asterisk asterisk. What's happening? She didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too focused on getting out. The front door was only steps away. She reached for the handle, gripping it so tightly her knuckles ached and twisted. Locked. No, 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 no. She asterisk, never asterisk. Locked it when she was home. A sharp asterisk, thud asterisk, sounded behind her. Something had dropped from the ceiling. Beatrice didn't turn around. She fumbled with the lock, fingers slick with sweat, pulling, twisting. Another thud, closer, a wet, ragged breath against the back of her neck. Her hand slipped, and suddenly the door asterisk was asterisk open. She stumbled forward, nearly falling onto the hallway floor. She expected Peter to be there, to grab her, to ask what the hell was going on. But the hallway was empty. She spun around. The apartment was dark, silent. The air inside looked wrong, as if the shadows had stretched just a little too far, as if the angles of the walls had shifted. The bathroom door stood open. Steam curled out into the hallway. The ceiling above it was empty. No figure, no crawling thing. Just the soft, echoing drip of water from the shower head. Her phone was still in her hand. Peter's voice was frantic. Beatrice, asterisk, asterisk, say something. She swallowed hard, stepping backward. I'm out, she whispered. I'm outside. She didn't know why she was whispering. It still felt like something was listening, something that hadn't followed her out. Yet. Beatrice stood in the hallway, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The door to her apartment remained open. A dark, yawning mouth, leading back into something that should have been familiar. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Peter's voice was still in her ear. Where are you? She swallowed hard. Hallway, just outside my door. I'm coming up, he said. Stay there. Beatrice didn't argue, but she couldn't bring herself to move. The silence in her apartment felt wrong, stretched too thin. Her body ached with the need to run, to put as much distance between herself and that thing as possible. But some part of her, the same part that had craned her neck to look at the ceiling in the first place, wanted to understand. She should have left. Instead, she took a single step forward. The air inside felt heavier, dense, like she was pushing through something unseen. The bathroom door was still open, the mirror above the sink fogged over from the shower. Something was written in the condensation. 3 words. Don't open it. Asterisk, asterisk. Beatrice's pulse stuttered. Her eyes darted to the reflection in the glass, expecting, dreading, to see something standing behind her. But the bathroom was empty. The message was fresh. Someone had written it asterisk, asterisk. After asterisk, asterisk, she ran. A soft creak sounded from deeper in the apartment, the closet. Beatrice backed up fast, nearly tripping over her own feet. Her mind screamed at her to get out, to stop being stupid, to listen to the warning scrawled on the mirror. The hallway floor creaked behind her. She spun, heart in her throat. Peter. His face was flushed from running up the stairs, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. His eyes flicked from her to the open door, his expression darkening. B, he said carefully. What's going on? Beatrice opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she explain it? That something had been inside, that it had been asterisk, asterisk, crawling on the ceiling, asterisk, asterisk, that it had left a message in the steam of her mirror, like some kind of final warning. She stepped back, out of the apartment. There was, I don't know, I heard knocking, but it wasn't you, and then her throat tightened. Something was in there. Peter frowned. Something? She just nodded. Peter exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Okay. Let's think for a second. His gaze flickered to the open door. You said you heard knocking? Beatrice nodded again. And then you got a message telling you asterisk, asterisk, not asterisk, asterisk, to open something? Her stomach twisted. Don't open it, dot asterisk, asterisk. A message left inside the apartment after she ran. Peter hesitated, like he was piecing something together. B. His voice was slow, careful. Did you actually asterisk, asterisk, see asterisk, asterisk, the front door when you opened it? Her breath caught. She had been in such a panic that she had yanked the handle, desperate to get out. The moment the door opened, she had run. But now that she thought about it, she never saw the asterisk, asterisk. Outside asterisk, asterisk of the door open. She only saw the hallway. Peter's expression darkened. What if... He swallowed hard. What if you never actually opened the front door? The hallway seemed to close in around her. The air grew thick, heavy. Beatrice's gaze drifted to the open doorway of her apartment. The shadows inside were deeper than they should have been. The angles of the walls seemed slightly off, and then she saw it. The frame of the front door, just inside the apartment. A second door, one that was still closed. Her stomach dropped. She never left. The thing that had been inside. Asterisk, asterisk. It let her out, dot asterisk, asterisk. Beatrice couldn't move. The realization sat heavy in her chest, squeezing her lungs, slowing her thoughts. The door frame she had run through wasn't her front door. It had been asterisk, asterisk, inside asterisk, asterisk. A copy, a perfect, seamless replica, and the real door, the one that led to the outside world, was still closed. She was still inside. Her body went cold. Peter was saying something, but his voice was distant, like it was coming from underwater. Beatrice turned back to the doorway. Eyes locked on that second door. It looked exactly the same. Same wood grain, same silver handle. But something was wrong with it. It was too asterisk, asterisk, flat asterisk, asterisk, like a painted backdrop in an old theater. Peter's hand brushed her shoulder, snapping her back into the moment. His touch was grounding, real. B, he said softly, I think we need to leave. Beatrice swallowed hard. I don't think we can. He followed her gaze. His breath hitched. A shadow flickered beneath the door, a faint, shifting outline, like something was standing on the other side. Watching, waiting. Peter grabbed her wrist. We're not staying to find out what that is. Beatrice's pulse hammered against her ribs, but she didn't resist as Peter pulled her back. He hesitated only for a second before reaching out, wrapping his fingers around the asterisk, asterisk, real asterisk, asterisk, front door handle, the one in the hallway, the one they had come through. He twisted. The door didn't budge. A sickening wave of dread crashed over Beatrice. Try again. Peter yanked harder. Nothing. It was locked. Nope. Sealed. Like it had never been meant to open. A slow, deliberate sound came from inside the apartment. Knock, 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 knock from the second door. Peter and Beatrice froze. The knocking came again. Slow, rhythmic, unhurried, then the asterisk, asterisk handle. Asterisk, asterisk, twisted. Peter yanked on the real door, panic setting in, muscles straining. Beatrice pressed her back against the cold wood, her breath shallow, heart hammering. The second door creaked, not open, but asterisk, asterisk, inward dot asterisk, asterisk. Like something on the other side was asterisk, asterisk, leaning against it, asterisk, asterisk. Pushing its weight forward, a whisper slithered through the air, threading between the walls, curling around them. Beatrice couldn't make out the words, but she asterisk, asterisk, felt asterisk, asterisk them. A request, a command, a promise. The second door shuddered. A crack splintered down the middle, jagged and dark, like a mouth forcing itself open. A hand, long, too thin, its fingers bent asterisk, asterisk the wrong way, slid through the gap. It reached asterisk, asterisk toward them, asterisk, asterisk. The real door, asterisk, asterisk, unlocked asterisk, asterisk on its own. Peter didn't hesitate. He grabbed Beatrice, yanked her backward, and the world asterisk, asterisk, snap dot asterisk, asterisk. The air shifted thick and syrupy, as if they had been asterisk, asterisk, pulled through something asterisk, asterisk. Then, silence. They were outside, standing in the cold night air. The apartment door behind them was asterisk, asterisk, closed, asterisk, asterisk. Normal, as if nothing had ever happened. Peter stumbled back, chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. "B," he gasped. What the hell was that? Beatrice couldn't answer. She could only stare at the door, because just before it shut, just for a split second, she had seen inside. Her apartment wasn't there anymore, just an endless black space, and something is still standing in it. Still asterisk, asterisk, watching asterisk, asterisk. Beatrice stood frozen in the cold night air, her body still humming, with the adrenaline that hadn't yet faded. Peter was doubled over beside her, hands braced on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Neither of them spoke. The apartment door loomed behind them. It looked normal, ordinary. A cheap wooden door leading to a tiny college apartment. But Beatrice knew what was behind it now. Nothing, and something. Something that had let her go. Her fingers twitched. She didn't want to be here. Not near this place. Not near that asterisk, asterisk door. Asterisk, asterisk. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to leave, to never look back. But she couldn't, not yet. Slowly she reached for her phone, her fingers unsteady as she swiped through her photos. Her breathing hitched. The message on the mirror. Don't open it. She had seen it, but she hadn't taken a picture of it, and yet there it was. A photo. Timestamped from earlier that night, her bathroom mirror fogged over, the words scrawled in dripping condensation. But there was something else in the reflection. A figure, half hidden in the steam, not standing. Asterisk, asterisk, crawling dot asterisk, asterisk. Its face was turned toward the camera, toward asterisk, asterisk, her asterisk, asterisk. The mouth stretched open, lips pulled too wide, but no teeth. No tongue, just asterisk, asterisk, empty blackness, asterisk, asterisk, where its mouth should be. She almost dropped the phone. Peter straightened beside her, rubbing a hand over his face. "We're not going back in there," he said, voice raw. "Right?" Beatrice shook her head. "No." They left without another word. Neither of them slept that night. By morning, Beatrice called her landlord, said there had been a break-in, said she didn't feel safe living there anymore. She didn't mention the thing on the ceiling. The asterisk, asterisk, second door. Asterisk, asterisk, the message in the mirror. It wouldn't have mattered. She packed fast, refusing to be alone in the apartment for more than a few minutes. Peter stayed in the hallway, watching the door, making sure it stayed asterisk, asterisk, closed, asterisk, asterisk. By the afternoon, she was gone. She moved across town, took a smaller apartment. She told herself she was safe now. That whatever was in that place, whatever had asterisk, asterisk, let her go, asterisk, asterisk, hadn't followed. Weeks passed. Then one night she came home late, exhausted from studying, her mind already half asleep. Then she flipped on the bathroom light, turned toward the mirror, and stopped cold. Something was wrong. The glass was fogged over. as if someone had just taken a shower. But Beatrice hadn't been home all day. Her stomach twisted. She stepped closer, breath uneven, pulse hammering. Slowly, she reached out, wiped her palm against the fog surface. A single phrase was scrawled beneath the condensation. Not. Don't open it. Asterisk. Asterisk this time. Something else. Asterisk. Asterisk. You already did. Dot asterisk. Asterisk. Behind her, in the reflection, something moved in the ceiling corner. Crawling, watching, waiting. I don't like taking Ava to the store this late. Not because it's dangerous. Our town is quiet, the kind of place where the worst crime is a stolen bike. But because of the way the fluorescent lights buzz like dying insects, and the aisles stretch long and empty, like tunnels leading nowhere. But we were out of milk, and Ava, with her big, pleading eyes, convinced me to pick up a cheap toy, too. Just a little one, Daddy, she had whispered, her small fingers curling around mine. How could I say no? The grocery store smelled like old fruit and cleaning products. The automatic doors wheezed as we stepped inside, and a blast of cold air rolled over my skin. A bored teenager at the register barely looked up from his phone. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of shoppers drifting between shelves like ghosts. I let Ava lead the way to the toy section, which was just a small shelf crammed between aisle 5 and 6, stuffed with dollar store plastic. She immediately grabbed Ito's a pink pony with stiff, unnatural hair and held it up with excitement. That's when I felt it. A shift in the air, the weight of eyes on me. I turned, slow, careful. A man stood in aisle 6, old, gray-haired, with a gaunt face stretched too tight over sharp cheekbones. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Ava. I pulled her close, my fingers tightening on her small shoulder. The man didn't move. I forced a smile. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get your toy and go. Ava didn't notice my change in tone. She clutched the pony to her chest as I grabbed a carton of milk and made my way toward the checkout. My pulse quickened. I risked another glance over my shoulder. The man was still there, still watching. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. I walked faster. Ava skipped beside me, humming, oblivious. We reached the register. I set the milk and toy down, reached for my wallet. A whisper right behind me, close enough that I felt the breath on my ear. She's not your daughter, is she? I spun around so fast I nearly knocked Ava over. The man stood inches from us now, his eyes locked onto mine, deep set and dark, like pits in his skull, his mouth curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. My throat tightened. What did you just say? She's not yours. His voice was calm. Certain? Not really. Ava tugged on my sleeve, confused. Daddy? I grabbed her, shielding her behind me. My heart pounded. The cashier finally looked up. Sir, is there a problem? I turned to him, relief flooding my chest. This man. But when I looked back, the aisle was empty. No man, no trace of him at all. Just cold, stale air where he had been. The cashier blinked at me. The other customers looked away. Uncomfortable. Are you okay? The cashier asked. I looked at Ava. She stared up at me, wide-eyed. I swallowed hard. Yeah. My voice came out thin. Just thought I saw someone. The cashier shrugged. I paid for the milk and the toy with shaky hands, my skin cold and clammy. As we walked out, I glanced back one last time, scanning the aisles. Nothing, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. And then Ava let go of my hand. I turned. She was gone. I felt my stomach drop. She had been right beside me, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. And now, nothing. I spun in a full circle, my breath coming sharp and fast. The store was small. There weren't many places she could have gone. Ava? No answer. A few shoppers glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The cashier, still scrolling through his phone, didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. I took a step forward, then another, my hands shaking. Ava, honey, where are you? Nothing. Just the hum of the overhead lights, the soft rustling of plastic bags, the muffled beeping of the scanner.
I turned back toward the aisles. Had she wandered off? Maybe back to the toy shelf? Maybe. A chill crawled up my spine. Aisle 6. I had looked there before leaving. The man was gone. But what if... I pushed through the empty aisles, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The store felt different now. Wider, darker. As if the shelves had stretched taller, closing in on me. I stopped at aisle 6. Empty. The gray tile floor, the rows of canned goods, the flickering fluorescent light buzzing overhead. I swallowed, my throat dry. Ava. Silence, and then a whisper, soft, distant, coming from somewhere deeper in the store. Daddy. It was her voice, but wrong, too faint, too far away, as if she were calling from behind a thick wall or from underwater. I turned sharply, scanning the aisles. Nothing. My skin prickled. Something wasn't right. I rushed back to the front of the store. The cashier barely looked up. "Hey," I said, my voice edged with panic.
Have you seen my daughter? She's small, wearing a blue jacket. She was just here. The cashier frowned. He glanced at the counter where the pink plastic pony still sat. What daughter? He asked. The world tilted. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was right here, I managed finally. You rang us up. She picked out that toy. The cashier shook his head. I don't think so, man. You came in alone. A cold, sick feeling spread through my chest. That wasn't true. That wasn't possible. I turned wildly, looking for someone, anyone who had seen us. The old woman near the bread aisle, the teenage boy filling shelves, the tired-looking dad with a shopping cart full of diapers. They all avoided my gaze, like they knew, like they had seen something they weren't supposed to. I staggered back toward aisle 6, my heart beat loud in my ears. The air felt thick now, heavy, like stepping into a place where time didn't move right. I walked slowly, scanning the shelves, my hands clenched into fists. Aisle 6 stretched longer than before. The shelves seemed taller, the shadows between them darker. And then I saw it. At the far end of the aisle, just past a row of soup cans. A door. A door that shouldn't have been there. It was old, faded white, with peeling paint and a rusted handle. No sign, no exit symbol. It hadn't been there before. I took a step closer. The air around it was wrong, stale, cold. And then, a single high-pitched giggle from behind the door. Ava. I lunged forward and grabbed the handle. It twisted easily. The door swung open. Darkness. A stairwell leading down. Cold, damp air wafting up, carrying the faint smell of mildew and something else. Something sweet and rotten. I hesitated. A whisper drifted up the stairs. Daddy! Soft, muffled, like a child calling from beneath the earth. I swallowed hard. Then I stepped inside. The door shut behind me. Not slammed, not creaked, just quietly clicked into place, sealing out the world I knew. The air was thick, damp, pressing against my skin like something alive. The only light came from the store behind me, spilling weakly down the stairs, barely reaching past the first few steps. Below, everything dissolved into darkness. Ava's voice had come from down there. I was sure of it. My fingers tightened against the railing, slick with something wet, and I forced myself down. One step, another. My breath was too loud, echoing in the narrow space. The deeper I went, the worse the smell became. Stale air mixed with something sour and rotten, like spoiled fruit left to liquefy in the heat. Somewhere in the darkness, something dripped. I reached the bottom. The floor was cold, rough concrete. The walls were brick, uneven and crumbling. No signs, no storage boxes, nothing to suggest this was part of the store. Just a hallway stretching forward. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of something shifting. I hesitated. Then, a giggle, soft, high-pitched. Ava. I ran. The hallway twisted, turned, stretched too long, as if I had stepped into someplace impossible. The air pressed heavier the further I went, and the light from the stairwell behind me had long disappeared. Then ahead, light. A single bulb flickered weakly from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow over the space beyond. A room. And in the middle of that room came Ava. She stood with her back to me, motionless, hands at her sides. Ava! I gasped, relief crashing over me. I took a step forward, reaching for her shoulder. Sweetheart, we have to go. She turned, and my stomach lurched. It was Ava. Her face, her blue jacket, the pink pony still clutched in her small hand. But her eyes, they weren't right. Too wide, too dark, empty. And her mouth, a slow, stretching grin that didn't belong on a child. She opened her mouth wider, too wide, and whispered, You're not supposed to be here. The light flickered, and then everything went black. Darkness swallowed me whole. Thick, suffocating, absolute. I reached out blindly, but my hands found only empty air. My breath came sharp and fast, echoing in the silence. My skin prickled with cold. The room, the hallway, the store above felt impossibly far away now, as if I had stepped into a place that wasn't supposed to exist. And Ava was here, but not here. Her voice came again, closer this time, right at my ear. You shouldn't have come. A hand, small and icy, closed around my wrist. I recoiled, jerking back, but her grip tightened, her fingers digging into my skin like tiny claws. Ava, I gasped, Sweetheart, we have to go. Come with me. She giggled, but it wasn't right. It was layered, echoing, as if something else was laughing through her. The darkness shifted. I felt it more than saw it. Something in the air, coiling, watching. The floor beneath me didn't feel like concrete anymore. It felt soft, damp, like the inside of something breathing. A scraping sound, low and deep, shivered through the blackness. I yanked at Ava's grip, trying to pull her toward me, but she didn't move. Daddy, she whispered. Her voice had changed, stretched. It wasn't Ava anymore. Something cold slithered past my ankle. I stumbled backward, my breath hitching. The darkness around me pulsed. The scraping sound grew louder, closer. Then, a single flicker of light, a weak, sputtering glow from above. The stairs. I ran. The ground beneath me rippled, the air thick as tar, fighting against me. But I pushed forward. I couldn't hear Ava anymore, only the thing she had become. It was coming. I felt it rushing behind me, fast, hungry. The breath of something ancient and wrong ghosted against the back of my neck. The stairs. So close now. I lunged forward, my fingers scraping against the rough wood of the railing. And then, a hand, long, skeletal, too many joints, snapped around my ankle. I screamed. The light flickered again, and in that brief flash I saw it. Not Ava. Not anymore. Something with two wide eyes and a mouth stretched impossibly open. Rows of teeth spiraling down its throat. The thing that had worn my daughter's face. Its grip burned against my skin. I kicked, desperate, my foot connecting with something soft and wet. It shrieked. The sound ripped through me, a high-pitched wail that didn't belong in this world. Its grip loosened. I didn't hesitate. I lunged up the stairs, my body screaming, and slammed against the door at the top. Locked. No. Behind me, the thing was coming faster now. Its breathing ragged, eager. I ran my shoulder against the door. Once. Twice it burst open. Cold fluorescent light. The grocery store. I fell forward, gasping, my hands hitting the slick tile floor. I turned. The door was gone. Nothing but the empty back wall of aisle 6. No stairs, no basement, no Ava. Just rows of canned goods, neatly stacked. The store was the same dull hum of lights, the same empty aisles, as if nothing had happened, as if she had never been here at all. I pushed myself up, my breath shuddering. My hands were shaking, my legs felt weak. A laugh, small, distant, echoed through the store. I spun, but the aisles were empty, and only the pink pony remained, lying abandoned on the floor, where Ava had dropped it, waiting. I stared at the toy, the little pink pony, its stiff plastic mane frozen mid-wave, its painted eyes wide and unblinking. A thing meant to be bright and innocent. Now it looked wrong, out of place, like a piece of her left behind. I bent down slowly, my fingers brushing against the cold tile. As I picked it up, the plastic felt slick with sweat or something else. My stomach twisted. I turned, scanning the aisles, my pulse pounding in my ears. Ava? My voice barely made a sound. It cracked, weak, swallowed by the store's hum. The cashier was still at the register, staring at his phone. Unbothered, oblivious, I forced my legs to move one step at a time, gripping the toy in my hand so tightly the edges dug into my palm. I walked back to the front, my movements slow, stiff, like I was sleepwalking through a nightmare that refused to end. The cashier didn't look up as I reached the counter. I swallowed hard. "Did you see where my daughter went?" He blinked at me. "Who?" I clenched my teeth. "Ava. My daughter, the little girl who was right here." His face remained blank, like I had asked him for directions to a place that didn't exist. "You came in alone, man." I felt my chest tighten, my throat burned. "No," I said more forcefully this time. "She was with me. She picked out this." I held up the pony, my hand trembling. He glanced at it, uninterested, then shrugged. "I don't know, dude. Maybe you—" He stopped mid-sentence. His face twitched, eyes unfocused. Then slowly, his gaze shifted, just slightly, to something behind me. I turned, at the end of the aisle, past rows of cereal boxes and candy racks. The old man stood watching, the one from before, gray-haired, sunken-cheeked, hollow-eyed, the man who had whispered in my ear. "She's not your daughter, is she?" The air around him seemed wrong, blurred at the edges, like he wasn't really standing there at all. Like he was something else, my body locked up, my skin prickled with cold. He smiled, and then without a sound, he lifted one shaking hand and pointed, not at me, at the toy in my hand, the pink plastic pony. The O. And Ava had chosen, the one that shouldn't be here. My breath caught in my throat. The man's lips moved. No sound came out. But I knew what he was saying. "You brought something back." And just like that, the lights flickered. The store around me seemed to bend just slightly. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing against my skin. I looked down. The pony in my hand felt warmer now. The plastic soft, almost pulsing, like it was breathing. I let go. The toy hit the ground with a soft, wet sound. Not plastic against tile. Something else. Something alive. I took a step back, my legs weak, my stomach twisting into knots. The old man lowered his hand, his eyes locked onto mine, and then, without a word, he turned and walked away, vanishing into the aisles, gone. I staggered toward the exit, my breath ragged, my vision blurring. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. My head pounded, my chest ached. I turned back. Through the glass doors, the store looked normal, too normal, the lights steady, the aisles quiet, the cashier scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. But the pink pony was still there, waiting where I had dropped it. I swallowed the rising nausea, my hand shaking. I looked down at my wrist. Faint red marks where Ava's fingers had gripped me. Too hard, too tight, like something that didn't want to let go. I staggered to my car, fumbled with the keys. My body screamed at me to drive, to go, to leave this place behind. But as I gripped the wheel, trying to calm the erratic pounding of my heart, I heard it again. A giggle, soft, faint, coming from the back seat. My entire body went cold. The car felt too small, the darkness outside pressing in like something alive. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, the fluorescent lights of the grocery store washing over the windshield. The parking lot was empty, silent. The giggle came again. Closer. My breathing was too loud in the stillness. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Ava?" No answer, only the soft creak of leather, like something shifting in the back seat. Slowly, painfully, I reached for the rearview mirror. My fingers trembled as I tilted it down, just enough to catch a glimpse. The back seat was empty. No, not empty. The pink pony sat in the center of the seat, right side up, staring at me. I had left it inside. I had watched it sit on that store floor, breathing. But now it was here. My stomach twisted, nausea crawling up my throat. I moved fast, my hand shooting to the door handle. I shoved it open and stumbled out, gasping for air. The night was thick and humid, but it felt better than the weight inside the car. I turned back, staring through the open door at the back seat, still empty. Still just the toy. No movement, no sound. I was losing it. I ran both hands through my hair, my pulse a hammer in my ears. My fingers still burned where Ava, no, not Ava, had grabbed me. I had to get out of here. I leaned back in just enough to grab the toy, pinching it between two fingers like it was something diseased. I flung it across the lot. It hit the asphalt with a small hollow thud, bouncing once before coming to a stop near a sewer grate. I got in the car, slammed the door, and started the engine. The dashboard lights flickered on, glowing blue in the darkness. I shifted into drive, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the lot. I didn't check the mirror. I just drove. The road stretched empty before me, lined with darkened storefronts and flickering streetlights. The town was asleep. The world felt wrong. My hands still trembled. My breath came uneven. I could still hear her laugh, still feel her fingers tightening on my wrist. Ava. No, not Ava. I needed to go home. I needed to clear my head. But as I reached the first red light, my stomach turned to ice. In the rearview mirror, the back seat was no longer empty. Ava sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, smiling, but her eyes, they weren't hers. They weren't human at all. My foot slammed the brake, tires screeching against the pavement. The car jerked to a stop in the middle of, or else the empty intersection, the streetlight casting an eerie red glow over the dashboard. My breath caught in my throat. She was there. Small, still, hands folded in her lap like a doll someone had carefully placed. Her blue jacket was zipped up to her chin. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her face, the shape of it, the curve of her cheeks, was Ava's. But her eyes, not Ava's, not a child's. Black pits, hollow and endless, stretching too deep, too far, as if something ancient peered through them. She smiled, not an innocent, joyful smile. Something else, something knowing. She was waiting for me to say something. I couldn't breathe. My fingers dug into the steering wheel, knuckles white. The hum of the engine felt deafening in the silence. I forced air into my lungs. Ava. My voice was barely above a whisper. The thing in the back seat tilted its head. You brought me back, she said, her voice light, sweet, just as it always had been. No, that wasn't her. I gripped the wheel tighter, my pulse roaring in my ears. Where is my daughter? I choked out. The thing blinked, slow and deliberate, as if considering the question. Then it giggled. She was never yours, it whispered. My stomach dropped. No. My voice was shaking. No, she was here. She was with me. She was borrowed, the thing said simply, like it was explaining something obvious. You thought she belonged to you, but she never did. A sharp, sickening pain bloomed in my head. My memories twisted, blurred. Ava's laughter at the breakfast table. Ava holding my hand as we crossed the street. Ava's sleepy good nights. Were they real? Had they ever been real? Or had something let me believe they were? I clenched my jaw, shaking my head, trying to force the thoughts away. I don't believe you, I whispered. The thing in the back seat leaned forward, closer now, until I could feel its breath against the back of my neck. Then look, it murmured. A hand, small, cold, touched my wrist, and suddenly, everything shattered. Memories rushed through me like ice water, sharp and cutting, tearing apart everything I thought I knew. The hospital room, where I'd held Ava for the first time, gone. The birthday parties, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, gone. The nights spent rocking her to sleep, singing soft lullabies into her hair, gone. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. There had never been an Ava. Not really. I had been alone, always. A man with empty hands and a hollow house, wandering through life with a daughter that had never existed. Something had let me borrow her, had let me pretend, and now it was taking her back. The pressure in my skull eased. The memories, the false, fabricated life peeled away like dead skin, leaving nothing behind but the raw, aching truth. I turned. The back seat was empty. No child, no monster, just silence. The red light turned green. I didn't move. I sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the empty back seat, as the first drops of rain hit the windshield. I was alone. I had always been alone. My throat ached, my hands trembled. Slowly, I turned back to the road. The grocery store was far behind me now, just another forgotten place in the rearview mirror. The toy was gone. Ava was gone. But as I finally pulled forward, heart hollow and mind unraveling, I felt it. The faintest touch against my wrist. A whisper, barely there. A giggle echoing through the rain. And deep in my bones, I knew she was never mine, but something else was. And it was still with me. The letter arrived in a plain envelope slipped under my apartment door in the dead of night. No return address, no stamp. Just my name written in a neat, unfamiliar hand. I hesitated before opening it. Something about it felt wrong, like an echo of a nightmare I couldn't quite remember. But my hands moved on their own, unfolding the crisp paper, my eyes scanning the first line. Asterisk, asterisk. Dear Anonymous. By the time I reached the end, my fingers were trembling. I read it twice, then a third time. It had to be a joke, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The weight of the words settled in my chest, heavy and cold. I'd always believed power came at a price. I had seen it in the corporate world, in backroom deals and forced smiles, in the way people rose and fell overnight. But this was different. This was something ancient, something dark, and it called to me. I should have thrown the letter away, burned it, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself staring at the instructions, my mind already working through the steps, a symbol of a snake, a hidden shop, a guardian in gray robes, a test. I had spent my whole life chasing power, always a step behind, always reaching but never grasping. I had been passed over, ignored, forgotten. Not this time. I shoved the letter into my pocket and grabbed my keys. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The charm shop was easy to find. Too easy. Tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned bookstore, its neon sign flickered weakly against the darkening sky. The smell of incense and dust filled my lungs as I stepped inside. Shelves lined with trinkets and talismans stretched into the dimly lit space, and an old woman sat behind the counter, watching me, with sharp, knowing eyes. And she didn't ask what I was looking for. She already knew. She slid a ring across the counter, silver with a coiled snake wrapping around the band. Its tiny jeweled eyes seemed to glint in the low light, watching me. I didn't ask how much. I paid in cash, my fingers cold, as I slipped the ring onto my hand. It fit perfectly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I walked for hours, through streets I had never seen before, past alleys that felt too long, too dark. The city pulsed around me, but the people were distant, their voices muffled. And then I saw it. A narrow building wedged between two taller ones, its walls faded, its door marked with a black snake. A small red outline peephole sat just above the handle. It hadn't been there before. I stepped forward, heart pounding. Knocked twice, showed the symbol. The letter had been clear. I raised my hand, pressing the ring against the peephole. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a click. The door swung open. A woman stood in the doorway, draped in gray robes, her face hidden in the shadows. She was small, frail-looking, but the air around her was thick, heavy with something unseen. I swallowed hard. Namaste, I said, bowing slightly. A long silence stretched between us. Then slowly she stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. I crossed the threshold. The door shut behind me with a final echoing thud. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of old incense, and something metallic, something faintly rotten. The walls were bare, stone rather than plaster, and the dim candlelight flickered against their rough surface, casting restless shadows. The woman in gray moved soundlessly, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. She led me down a narrow hallway, her robes whispering against the floor. I followed, my pulse loud in my ears. The room she brought me to was simple. A wooden table sat in the center, its surface worn and scarred. 2 chairs, a single candle burning low in its holder. No windows, No other doors. She gestured for me to sit. I did. She took the seat across from me, folding her hands in her lap. Her nails were long, yellowed, curling slightly at the edges. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I expected, almost gentle. "You seek power." It wasn't a question. I nodded. She tilted her head slightly, the candlelight catching the deep lines in her face. "And what have you given up for it?" The question made something tighten in my chest. I had given up plenty. Years spent clawing my way up, sacrificing sleep, health, relationships, but that wasn't what she meant. She was asking something deeper, something I wasn't sure how to answer. Her lips curled just slightly, as if she could hear the thoughts racing through my head. "Be careful," she murmured. "Power demands more than you expect." She reached forward, slow and deliberate, and tapped the ring on my finger. "Where did you find this?" I hesitated. "The charm shop," I said. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you found it?" I frowned. But she shook her head, silencing me, her fingers curled, sharp knuckles pressing against the table. "Tell me about your mother." I blinked. The shift in conversation threw me off balance. "What?" "Your mother," she repeated, tilting her head. "Or your father, if you prefer." Something about the way she said it sent a shiver up my spine. "I don't see how that's relevant." Her smile widened, slow and deliberate. "Oh, but it is," she said. "Everything is." I forced my expression to remain neutral, but my stomach twisted. The letter had warned me about this. She was prying, searching for weakness. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I came here for the tapa," I said, "not to discuss my past." Her smile faded. For a long moment, she said nothing. The air in the room felt denser, the candle's flame barely flickering. Then she nodded once. "Good," she rose, moving toward the far wall, where a heavy metallic door stood. I hadn't noticed it before. It blended into the shadows, tall and thick, inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. "This is your last chance," she said, running a hand over the door's surface. "Once you enter, you will not leave until the tapa is complete." I swallowed hard. The air felt electric, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. But I had already made my choice. I stood, steadying myself. "I'm ready." She pushed the door open. Beyond it, darkness and the sound of water, slow and rhythmic, dripping into something unseen. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. The darkness swallowed me whole. Thick, suffocating, absolute. The only sound was the slow, steady drip of water. I stood motionless, my breath shallow, my fingers twitching at my sides. I reached forward blindly, and my fingertips brushed the rough surface of a wall. Cold stone, damp. The air smelled of metal and something else. Something stale, like old blood. Then, a flicker. A dim, golden glow flared to life across the room, casting long, jagged shadows. A single candle set on a wooden table in the corner. Its weak flame barely reached the walls, but I could see enough. The dagger, crooked, rusted along the edges, its handle wrapped in something dark, something that looked too much like human hair. The bowl of water, almost full, the surface trembling slightly, with each slow drip from above. And the man, bound to a wooden chair, his wrists and ankles wrapped in thick rope. His head lolled forward, dark hair matted to his forehead. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. He was alive, but barely. My stomach clenched. I had known what to expect. The letter had laid it out in cold, methodical detail. But knowing and seeing were two different things. His skin was pale, almost gray in the candlelight. Sweat gleamed along his temple, and his fingers twitched against the bindings. A gag had been tied around his mouth, but even through it I could hear the faint sound of his breathing. Ragged, wet, I stepped closer. He stirred, his head tilting upward, his eyes blinking open. Dark eyes, hollow, and yet as they met mine there was something there. Recognition. My breath caught. No, that wasn't possible. I didn't know him, did I? The moment stretched, silent and unbearable. Then, the drip. Water hitting the surface of the bowl. A single quiet sound. The signal. I swallowed hard. The dagger was cold in my hand, heavier than it should have been. My grip tightened around the handle, the rusted edge pressing against my palm. One cut, not deep, not fatal, just enough to begin. I moved slowly, pressing the blade against the man's arm. His body tensed. His breath came faster, harsher, through the gag. His fingers curled into fists. He was afraid. I should have been too. But something shifted inside me. Something cold. The blade pressed down. Skin split, dark blood welled, glistening in the candlelight. He jerked against the ropes, a muffled cry escaping his throat. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe, to watch as the blood traced a slow, trembling path down his arm. The drip of water filled the silence. Again, this time my own skin. I turned the dagger in my hand, pressed the blade to my forearm. The metal bit into flesh, and a sharp, stinging pain shot through me. My breath hitched, but I didn't flinch. The cut wasn't deep, just like his. The pain was dull compared to the weight in my chest. Drip. The next cut, him first. Then me. The rhythm was slow, deliberate. 25 times, each cut deeper than the last. By the 10th, my hands were shaking. By the 15th, I felt something stirring in my blood, something warm, thrumming beneath my skin. By the 20th, the pain blurred into something else, something almost intoxicating. By the 25th, I felt nothing at all. A change was happening. I could feel it crawling through my veins, seeping into my bones. The wounds on my arm were closing. The deep gashes that should have bled for hours were smoothing over, the skin knitting itself back together. I flexed my fingers. No pain, no scars. The man across from me wasn't so lucky. His head hung low, his body limp. The candlelight flickered against his motionless form. I reached forward, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse. Weak. Barely there. I was supposed to kill him. The letter had been clear. But as I stared down at him, something cold coiled in my stomach. I knew him. Not his name, not from where. But something deep inside me whispered that we had met before, and that this was not the first time. My fingers tightened around the dagger. One last cut. The final act. His life or mine. The door behind me remained closed, waiting. I stood over him, dagger in hand, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on me. The air in the room had changed, thickened with something unseen, something watching. The candle flickered violently, though there was no wind. The man's breathing was shallow, his body slumped in the chair. But he was still alive. The letter had been clear. He wasn't supposed to be. I hesitated. Why did I know him? The thought dug into my mind like a splinter, sharp and impossible to ignore. His face, though bloodied and pale, was familiar in a way I couldn't place. It wasn't just recognition. It was deeper than that. A memory buried so far beneath the surface that I couldn't grasp it, only feel the vague unease of something forgotten. The dagger trembled in my grip. I could end this now. A single cut, a final act, and I would walk out of here changed, powerful. Drip. The water struck the bowl again, its sound impossibly loud in the silence. Then the man moved, not a twitch, not a shudder. His head snapped up. His eyes locked onto mine, wide and dark, filled with something raw, something knowing. And he smiled, a slow, weak, blood-stained smile. My heart slammed against my ribs. I took a step back, my pulse roaring in my ears. The dagger felt useless in my hand, a toy rather than a weapon. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. You don't remember, do you? I couldn't speak. The walls around us seemed to close in, the candlelight warping and twisting. Shadows stretched unnaturally, too long, too alive. He let out a weak chuckle, a wet rattling sound. They do this to all of us, he said. They take pieces of us, make us forget, but it never lasts. My grip on the dagger tightened. This was a trick. It had to be. But then he said my name, not the name I use now. The name I had forgotten. It hit me like ice down my spine, a sound both foreign and intimately familiar. A name I hadn't spoken in years. A name I wasn't supposed to remember. I stumbled back, my breath coming fast and shallow. No, I whispered. His smile widened, though his lips were cracked and bleeding. You were here before, he said. You were sitting where I am now. The room spun, the candle flickered, the walls groaned as if they were breathing. Memories, fragments, flashes broke through the surface of my mind. A metallic door slamming shut, a different candle, a different dagger, blood, my own screams, and another man bound to this chair, not him. Me. My stomach twisted violently, bile rising in my throat. The letter, the warnings, the rules. It had never been about power. It had been a cycle, a loop. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. The door behind me rattled. Something was waiting on the other side. The man in the chair took a shuddering breath. You have a choice, he whispered. You can finish this, take my place, or you can break it. My hands were slick with sweat, the dagger heavy, my head spinning. The shadows along the walls slithered, the candle guttered, barely clinging to life. The door creaked open, and something stepped inside. The door yawned open behind me, and the air shifted, cold, stale, ancient. I couldn't turn around. I didn't need to. I felt it, whatever asterisk it asterisk was. Stepping inside, silent but heavy, its presence thick in the room. The candle barely flickered, but the shadows on the walls swayed like something had disturbed them. The man in the chair tensed, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. He knew what was behind me. He had seen it before. And now it was here for me. A choice. I could finish it, play my part, take my power, leave this place with some even unnatural coursing through my veins. Or I could break the cycle. The thing behind me exhaled, a slow rattling sound, like wind through a hollow corpse. My skin prickled, a deep primal terror clawing up my spine. The man in the chair struggled against his bindings, his voice barely a whisper. Don't let it take you. I gripped the dagger, my knuckles white, my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I had done everything the letter instructed. I had followed every step, made every cut, bled as I was told to bleed. But no one ever left this place the same. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last, unless I ended it. The thing behind me, asterisk, moved asterisk. A single step, slow and deliberate, the air twisting with its presence. I turned the dagger in my hand, blade against my palm, handle out, and I asterisk cut the rope's asterisk. The man gasped as the bindings fell away. His arms dropped to his sides, weak, bloodied. He stared at me wide-eyed, as if he hadn't expected me to do it. As if no one had ever done it before, the candlelight dimmed. The shadows stretched, and then from behind me, a voice. Low, guttural, ancient. Wrong choice. The air asterisk collapsed asterisk. The candle was snuffed out, and the thing lunged. I didn't think I asterisk ran asterisk. I grabbed the man's arm, yanking him up, half dragging his weakened body. As we stumbled toward the open door, the walls groaned, the ground trembled. The thing asterisk howled asterisk. A sound that wasn't human, wasn't asterisk of asterisk, this world. Something so wrong it made my vision blur, my skull ache. The hallway beyond the door stretched impossibly long, twisting like a living thing. The air was thick with something unseen, something that didn't asterisk want asterisk us to leave. But I ran anyway. The man beside me barely kept up, his legs weak, his breath ragged. Behind us, the thing followed, faster than it should have been, closer than it should have been. I could feel it at my back, its cold fingers reaching, stretching, almost there. And then, the gray-robed woman was in front of us, standing in the hall, still, silent, watching. She didn't move to stop us. She just smiled, not cruel, not kind, just asterisk, knowing asterisk. The door behind her, the exit, was open. The moment we crossed it, the air changed, warm, stagnant, real. I collapsed onto the street, the man beside me hitting the pavement with a thud. The night sky stretched above us, empty and vast. The city hummed around us, cars in the distance, life moving on as if nothing had happened, as if we had never been gone. I turned back. The shop was asterisk gone asterisk. No door, no black snake, no building at all. Just an alleyway filled with trash like it had been there forever. The man beside me groaned, rolling onto his back, staring at the sky. His breath was steady. He was alive, and so was I. But something was different. I could feel it in my bones, in my blood. A change, not a CD, not power, something else, something watching, waiting, because I had broken the cycle, and the things in the dark do not forget. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching. The man turned his head, looking at me. "You should run," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, raw. I didn't ask why. I already knew. "You won't find it on any map. No records, no ruins. The land where it stood has been reclaimed by time, swallowed by nature like it was never there. But I remember it. A prison in Pennsylvania, hidden in the trees, forgotten for a reason. In 1989, I was sent there for robbery. 5 years, locked away with the worst of them. The place was old, iron bars rusted, stone walls crumbling, the air thick with damp and decay. It had a way of making you feel like you'd never leave, like the outside world was just a story someone once told you. It wasn't the guards that kept most men from trying to escape. It was something else. A story that spread through the prison like infection, whispered in the dead of night. I heard it from an old-timer named Earl. He'd been there since the 60s, claiming to know every secret the place held. Earl was the kind of man who never scared easy, but when he spoke about the river beyond the fence, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Winslow tried it," he said one night, staring at the ceiling of his cell. Back in the late 40s, big guy, mean as hell. He was innocent, or so he said, but nobody believed him. Spent years staring out his window at the trees past the river. Said he saw kids playing out there, laughing. Nobody else ever saw him, just Winslow. He paused, fingers tracing the cracked mortar between the bricks. The night he broke out, his cellmate, Solchek, heard everything. First, Winslow's footsteps in the mud, then the fence rattled, then the splash as he hit the river, and all the while, them kids were laughing. I felt a chill creep down my spine. "What happened to him?" I asked. Earl turned his head slowly, meeting my eyes with a look that still haunts me. "They found bits of him the next morning," he murmured. "Scraps of cloth, his tongue, and words scratched in the dirt. Asterisk, do not follow the sirens." I tried to laugh it off, but it stuck with me. The way Earl said it, the way the other inmates never denied it. Something about this place wasn't right. I didn't believe it, at least not then, but that changed the first time I heard the laughter myself. It was a foggy night, the kind where the air felt thick, like the world was holding its breath. I was lying on my cot, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it, soft, distant echoing from beyond the river, children laughing. I sat up, my heart hammering. It wasn't the playful sound you'd expect from kids. It was asterisk, wrong asterisk. Hollow, like something imitating children, but not quite getting it right. My cellmate, Danny, bolted upright. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. We both crept to the tiny window, pressing our faces to the bars. The river was a black void in the night, but past it, through the shifting fog, I swore I saw movement, small shapes flitting between the trees. Danny sucked in a breath. "Jesus, they're real." I didn't sleep that night, neither did he. The next day, we tried to tell one of the guards, Hendricks, a guy who had been working there for years. He just shook his head. "Keep your mouth shut," he muttered, not looking at us. "And don't ever, ever listen to them." That was when I knew the stories weren't just stories. Something asterisk was asterisk out there, and it was waiting. I tried to put it out of my mind, to tell myself that the laughter had just been some kind of trick, a weird echo, maybe the wind in the trees. But I knew better, so did Danny. Neither of us spoke about it during the day. But at night, when the lights went out, and the prison settled into its usual uneasy silence, we sat awake, waiting, listening. The next time it came, it was worse. It started the same way. Soft, distant giggles drifting through the fog. But this time, the laughter didn't stay across the river. It got closer. Danny and I sat frozen, backs pressed against the cold brick wall of our cell, staring at the window. The sound didn't come from beyond the river anymore. It was asterisk inside asterisk the prison yard. A slow, creeping horror sank into my bones. There was no way in. The fence was high, topped with rusted barbed wire. No one ever escaped, and no one ever got in. But the laughter had found a way. Danny stood, inching toward the window. His breath fogged against the glass as he squinted into the dark. "I don't see anything," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "Then why does it sound so close?" He didn't answer. Neither of us moved. Then just as suddenly as it had started, the laughter stopped. The silence was worse. We sat there, waiting, straining our ears, expecting something to follow. A scream, a shuffle of footsteps, anything. Nothing came. Danny let out a shaky breath and backed away from the window. "I'm losing my mind," he muttered. "That's what this place does. It makes you see things, hear things." I didn't argue, but I knew better. The next morning, something changed. Hendricks, the guard who had warned us, wasn't at his post. Whispers spread fast through the cell block. By midday, we got the official story. Hendricks was missing, just gone. His car was still in the parking lot. His shift had started like normal, but at some point during the night, he vanished. No one saw him leave. No cameras caught him walking out. They found his key ring near the fence, lying in the dirt, and just a few feet away. The same words Winslow had scratched into the earth all those years ago were scrawled in the mud. "Do not follow the sirens." Danny and I didn't talk much that day. Neither did anyone else. The whole prison felt different, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds. Then the laughter came again. It started faint, like always. But this time, there was something else. A sound underneath it, a whisper. My skin went cold. I turned my head slowly, heart thudding in my chest. It met Danny's wide, terrified eyes. He heard it too. I sat up, gripping the edge of my cot. The whisper wasn't clear, more like a breath, a suggestion of words just beyond understanding. Then, through the fog of half-formed syllables, one word came through. My name. I shot to my feet, backing away from the window, like it might reach through the bars and pull me out. Danny grabbed my arm, fingers digging into my skin. "We gotta tell someone," he hissed. I shook my head. "Who?" "You saw what happened to Hendricks." His face was pale, eyes darting toward the door, like he was expecting something to walk through it. "We can't just sit here." But that's exactly what we did. Neither of us moved, too scared to look outside, too scared to shut our eyes. The whispering faded, the laughter drifted away. When the sun came up, it felt like a dream, a nightmare that should have ended. But the next night, it came back, and this time, it didn't stay outside. The moment the cell block went quiet for the night, I felt it. A shift in the air, a weight pressing down on my chest like something unseen had slithered its way inside the prison walls. Danny sat on his cot, knees drawn to his chest, his fingers twitching against his arms. Neither of us spoke. There was no need to. We were waiting for it. The laughter. It didn't come from the river this time. It didn't echo from beyond the fence. It was closer, much closer. A giggle, high-pitched and airy, floated through the hallway just beyond our cell door. It was light, playful, the kind of sound you'd expect from a child playing hide-and-seek. But there were no children here. There had never been. Danny and I locked eyes, and I could see my own terror reflected in his. He opened his mouth to say something, but then the laughter came again, this time, from right outside our cell. Danny shot to his feet. I grabbed his arm, shaking my head. "Don't," I whispered. He ignored me. He took slow, cautious steps toward the bars, peering into the dimly lit corridor beyond. My heart pounded in my ears as I crept up behind him, forcing myself to look. The hallway was empty. Nothing moved, no shadows, no figures, just rows of locked cells stretching into darkness. But the laughter was still there. It didn't come from any one place. It seemed to echo from all around us, weaving through the air like smoke. My stomach twisted into knots. Then something moved. A shadow, shifting just at the edge of the dim light. Not walking, not running, gliding. Danny let out a sharp breath and stumbled back, his foot catching on the edge of his cot. He hit the mattress hard, eyes wide with terror. I didn't move, I couldn't. My body had locked up, frozen by something far more primal than fear. The shadow drifted forward, a shape barely visible against the dark. Just a smear of movement, like something half there, half not. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The laughter stopped. The hallway fell into complete silence. Danny was breathing hard, hands clenched into fists. "Did you see that?" I nodded. My mouth was dry, my limbs still stiff with panic. For the rest of the night, we didn't sleep. By morning, we had a plan. We needed to get out. Not just out of the cell, out of the prison. Danny had been here longer than me. He knew which guards could be bribed, which ones could be manipulated. We weren't the first inmates to dream of escape, but we had something the others didn't. We had a reason to run. By midday, Danny had made contact with a guy in Block C, someone who had been planning an escape route for months. The fence was old, rusted in some places. There was a weak spot near the back, past the yard. It would take time, but it was possible. I didn't care about the risk. Whatever was haunting this prison, whatever had taken Hendrix, it was getting closer, and I wasn't going to wait for it to come for me. That night, we waited again. Not for the laughter, not for the whispers. We waited for our chance to escape. But something had other plans. At exactly midnight, the lights flickered. The prison was old. Power outages weren't uncommon. But this was different. The flickering wasn't random. It was rhythmic, slow, deliberate, almost like breathing. Danny tensed. I gripped the edge of my cot. Then the sound returned. Not laughter this time. Footsteps, bare feet slapping against the concrete. Light, quick, moving too fast to be human. They were coming. Danny lunged for the bars, shaking them violently. "Guard," he shouted. "Hey, somebody get us the hell out of here." No response. The footsteps grew louder. Then, just outside our cell, they stopped. I turned my head slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Through the bars, I saw it. A figure standing motionless in the dim light. Small, childlike, but wrong. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, too far to one side, like its neck had been snapped. Its limbs were thin, stretched just a little too long. And its face, God, its face asterisk, empty, no eyes. Just smooth, featureless skin where its features should have been. It raised one hand and pressed its fingers against the bars. Then it spoke. Not in words, not in whispers. It laughed. Asterisk. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. The next thing I knew, guards were dragging me out of the cell, their voices sharp, their grips painful. Danny was kicking, fighting, his face pale with panic. "Asterisk! It was here," he yelled. "Asterisk! Did you see it? Tell me you saw it." The guards said nothing. They didn't even look at us. They just took us away. Danny was thrown into solitary. I never saw him again. I spent the next 3 days in a fog. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing standing at our cell. Its neck bent, its faceless head watching me with nothing at all. I told myself I'd imagined it, that fear had twisted the dark into something worse than it was. But I hadn't imagined Danny. I hadn't imagined the way he screamed. I asked about him the next morning. The guards wouldn't answer. By the second day, rumors spread. Some said he'd lost his mind in solitary, started clawing at the walls until his fingernails tore off. Others whispered he'd never even made it to the hole, that he'd disappeared on the way there. No one had any answers, and the laughter still came every night. I had to do something. If I sat there waiting, I'd go mad just like the rest of them. So I started asking questions. I knew who to talk to, the old inmates, the ones who had been here long enough to know things the guards wouldn't tell us. I found Earl first, the same man who had told me about Winslow's escape. He was sitting on his cot, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. When I approached, he didn't look up. "You hear about Danny?" I asked. He took his time lighting the cigarette. Took a long drag, then finally he exhaled and spoke. "You should stop asking questions." Not until I get some answers. Earl chuckled, shaking his head. That's what they all say. Then they end up like Winslow. I clench my fists. What asterisk they? Earl sighed. His hands trembled as he rubbed his forehead. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were tired. They call 'em sirens, he muttered. Not like the ones from sailor stories. These ones, they asterisk belong asterisk to this place. I swallowed. Where did they come from? No one knows. Prison's been here longer than any of us. Some say before it was a prison, this land was a village. Something bad happened here. Real bad. And whatever it was, it never left. The hairs on my arms stood up. Earl leaned in, his voice lowering. They don't just make you hear things, kid. They asterisk get inside your head asterisk. They show you things, make you see what they want you to see. I thought about the faceless figure. They took Hendrix, I said. Earl nodded. And Danny, too, sounds like. A cold weight settled in my stomach. You saw him, didn't you? Earl's voice was quiet now. I hesitated, then I nodded. Earl exhaled through his nose. Then it's already too late for you. The words sent ice through my veins. I stepped back. That's not funny. He didn't laugh. Instead, he put out a cigarette, stood up, and turned away. The conversation was over. That night, I sat on my cot, staring at the ceiling, repeating the same thing to myself over and over. I wasn't going to end up like Winslow, or Hendrix, or Danny. I was getting out of here. I didn't care what it took. I wasn't waiting any longer. Whatever was haunting, this place, whatever had taken Danny and Hendrix, it wasn't going to get me. I spent the next day watching the guards, their movements, their rotations. There was a shift change at midnight. A small window in security was at its weakest. That was my chance. I knew where the fence was weakest. Danny had figured it out before he disappeared. I just had to make it there. But I wasn't the only one planning something. That night, just before lights out, Earl came to my cell. He leaned against the bars, his usual easygoing expression, replaced by something harder, something unreadable. You really gonna do this? He asked. I nodded. Earl sighed. Then listen to me. When you get to the river, don't look, don't listen, just run. I swallowed hard. Why are you helping me? A sad smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. 'Cause I tried once too. That was all he said before walking away. Midnight came. The moment the lights flickered for shift change, I moved. I slipped out of my cell the way Danny had planned, using a stolen key from one of the lazier guards. I crept down the hallway, past the sleeping inmates, past the empty cells that should have held Danny, Hendrix, Winslow. Every step felt like it carried me deeper into something I wasn't meant to escape. When I reached the yard, the air felt heavier, thicker. Fog rolled across the grass, swirling between my legs as I moved. The laughter hadn't started yet, but I could feel it waiting. I didn't stop. I reached the fence, fingers scrambling for the weak spot. The metal was old, rusted, just as Danny had said. I started climbing, ignoring the way the mist seemed to shift beneath me, curling like grasping fingers. Then the laughter started. It came all at once. A dozen voices, 100, surrounding me, taunting me. I climbed faster. I reached the top of the fence, swung my leg over, and dropped. My feet hit the mud with a sickening squelch, and then I was running. The river was just ahead. The laughter grew louder, closer. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was beside me, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. Small shapes darting between the trees, too fast, too wrong. I clenched my teeth and ran harder. I hit the riverbank without thinking, launching myself into the water. It was freezing, the shock slamming into me like a physical force, but I didn't stop. The laughter twisted into something else, screaming, the same scream Solchek had heard when Winslow vanished. My limbs burned as I pushed forward, forcing myself through the current, forcing myself not to look. Something brushed against my leg. I kicked harder. The water churned around me, thickening, pulling. Hands, fingers grasping at my ankles. I broke through the surface, gasping, clawing for the opposite bank. The mud sucked at my hands as I dragged myself up, shaking, choking. The screams behind me reached a fever pitch. Then, silence. I collapsed onto my back, chest heaving, staring up at the dark sky. I had made it. I turned my head slowly, eyes searching the trees, the fence, the river. Nothing, no laughter, no movement. I was alone. For the first time in weeks, I let out a breath that didn't feel like it was my last. I forced myself to my feet. My clothes were soaked, my body shaking, but I was alive. I didn't look back as I staggered into the woods. I kept walking and walking and walking. The sun never rose, the woods never ended. Somewhere in the distance, faint and far away, I heard it. A giggle, soft, playful, and then my name. The laughter had crossed the river. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because someone somewhere might remember. Maybe because I need to believe that I haven't lost my mind. It started with the letter. I was working the late shift at Asterisk, the Sentinel Asterisk, the kind of newspaper that had been limping along since people stopped reading newspapers. Most nights were quiet. Press releases, crime blotters, the occasional scandal. Nothing that mattered. Then the mail came in. We weren't supposed to get physical mail anymore. Everything was digital. But there it was. A single envelope, thick paper, slightly yellowed. My name was typed on the front, no return address. I remember the weight of it in my hands. Heavy, like it didn't want to be opened. I took it to my desk, under the dim glow of the newsroom lights. The others had gone home hours ago. Only the hum of the fluorescent bulbs and the occasional creak of the old building kept me company. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I couldn't read it, not because it was in another language. No, that would have been easy. This was something else. The symbols on the page twisted, shifting as I tried to focus. My eyes ached, my stomach churned. It wasn't words. It was something pretending to be words. And then I saw the date. Asterisk, asterisk, January 17, 202. 5 dot asterisk, asterisk. 3 days from now. I dropped the letter, my breath coming short and fast. My mind scrambled for explanations. An elaborate prank. A formatting error. Something rational. But the moment I looked away, I felt it. A presence. The kind that makes your skin prickle before your brain catches up. The kind that tells you you're not alone. I turned. The newsroom was empty. The dark windows reflected only myself. Sitting there, pale and shaking. Still, I knew something was watching. I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and locked it in my desk. Out of sight, but not out of mind. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were tangled, flickering images of places I didn't recognize. A town swallowed by mist. Streetlights flickering over empty roads. A post office abandoned, yet filled with mail. A name echoed in my head, whispered by voices I didn't recognize. Asterisk, asterisk, Arcadia dot asterisk, asterisk. I woke up gasping, heart pounding. The name was already slipping from my memory, like trying to hold water in my hands. At dawn, I returned to the office, hoping the letter would make more sense in the light of day. But when I unlocked my desk drawer, it was empty. The letter was gone. And the only thing left in its place was a gas station map, one that showed a state that wasn't supposed to exist. I stared at the map, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The paper was soft from age, creased in all the familiar ways a well-used map should be. It smelled faintly of gasoline and ink, like something pulled from the glove compartment of an old car. The problem was, I knew this map was wrong. It showed a state I had never seen before, nestled between Missouri and Tennessee, stretching north into territory that should have been Kentucky. A state with winding highways, rivers cutting through dense forest, and towns marked in neat little black dots. A state called Arcadia. I traced the lines with my fingertip, the names of cities and counties pressing into my mind like something half-remembered. It felt familiar in a way that made my skin crawl, like hearing a song from childhood, but not remembering the words. A sharp knock at the door snapped me out of it. I shoved the map back into my desk drawer as my editor, Bill, stuck his head in. He was bleary-eyed, holding a coffee that looked more like sludge than liquid. "You look like hell," he muttered. Did we get any weird mail yesterday? I asked, my voice too tight, too eager. Bill frowned. No. Why? I hesitated. Nothing. Just thought I saw something. Try getting some sleep, kid. He disappeared down the hall, already forgetting the conversation. I waited until he was gone before I opened the drawer again. The map was still there, crisp and real. Not a hallucination, not a dream. I had to know more. I spent the rest of the morning digging. The Sentinel's archives went back 100 years. Yellowed clippings and microfilm reels cataloging everything from political scandals to local bake sales. If Arcadia had ever existed, there had to be something. But there wasn't. No mention of it. No records, no articles, no obituaries from a town that should have been right there. It was like someone had erased it, scrubbed every trace of it clean. Except for the map. I ran my fingers through my hair, frustration building in my chest. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe this was some elaborate joke, some viral marketing stunt. Then my email pinged. The subject line was blank. The sender was nothing but a string of gibberish I almost ignored. Read it. Then I saw the attachment, a scanned image, old newspaper print. The headline read, Arcadia declared 51st state. The date, asterisk, January 17, 1977 dot asterisk, asterisk. The same day the letter had been dated. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some prank. Arcadia was real. And something didn't want me to remember it. I stared at the screen, my eyes locked on the newspaper clipping. The grainy black and white photograph beneath the headline showed a group of people standing in front of a courthouse, smiling, waving small flags, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, a moment of celebration. It should have been historic, but I had never seen this image before. I clicked to enlarge it, my pulse hammering. The faces were clear, the details sharp despite the age of the photo. A man in a suit at the podium, a woman holding a child, a line of officials standing shoulder to shoulder. I didn't recognize any of them, and yet something about them felt wrong. I leaned in closer. The people in the photo were smiling, but their eyes were looking past the camera, as if they were seeing something just behind the lens. A cold shiver ran through me. I checked the email again, searching for a sender, a source, anything that could tell me who had sent it. Nothing. The address was just nonsense, random letters and numbers. I hit reply. Asterisk, asterisk. Who are you? Where did you get this? My finger hovered over the send button. I hesitated. Then, before I could change my mind, I pressed it. A second later, my inbox refreshed. The email was gone. Not in my sent folder, not in my drafts, no trace of it ever having existed. I felt a sick twist in my gut. Something was happening, something I couldn't explain. I grabbed the map from my desk drawer, unfolded it again. My eyes scanned the names of the towns, the roads, the rivers. If Arcadia had been erased from history, if no one remembered it, then why did this map still exist? And why had it come to me? I had to go. The thought was immediate, absolute. If Arcadia had disappeared, then maybe, just maybe, it hadn't disappeared completely. Maybe there was something left. Some fragment, some trace. I pulled up my phone, opened a GPS app. I typed in one of the town names from the map. Asterisk, asterisk. Halloway. Arcadia.asterisk, asterisk. No results. I tried another. Asterisk, asterisk. Blackridge. Arcadia.asterisk, asterisk. Nothing. I swallowed hard, then did something reckless. I typed in the coordinates, the ones printed on the map just beneath the state line. The app hesitated. The screen flickered like static on an old TV. Then, after a long, glitching pause, a route appeared, a thin, unmarked road stretching through the countryside. No highway signs, no labels, just a path leading somewhere that wasn't supposed to exist. I stared at it, my hands sweating against the phone. I had a choice. Close the map. Forget about the letter, the email, the town that no one remembered. Walk away, or get in my car and follow the road. I reached for my keys. One way or another, I was going to find Arcadia. I drove for hours. The road stretched endlessly ahead. winding through barren fields and dense patches of forest. My GPS struggled to keep up, the blue dot jittering on the screen, as if unsure whether the road even existed. Every so often, the signal would cut out entirely, leaving me with nothing but the map from my desk and a growing sense of unease. There were no signs, no mile markers, no indication that this road led anywhere at all, just cracked asphalt and faded yellow lines swallowed by the creeping dusk. I kept driving. The further I went, the quieter it became. The hum of civilization, radio signals, distant highways, even the occasional farmhouse, slowly disappeared. The world outside my car felt empty, not just deserted, hollow. Then I saw the sign. It was old, nearly rusted through, barely visible in the fading light, but I could still make out the words. Asterisk, asterisk. Welcome to Arcadia. Asterisk, asterisk. I hit the brakes, my heart slamming into my ribs. The sign stood crooked at the edge of the road, half buried in weeds. Behind it, the trees pressed close, their branches tangled like grasping fingers. I wasn't supposed to be here. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I had come too far. I stepped out of the car. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something metallic, like rust or blood. The sky overhead was the color of bruises, streaked with deep purple and sickly yellow. I took a step forward. The trees loomed, silent and watching. I could hear my own breath, too loud in the stillness. Then, from somewhere in the distance, a sound. A low, rhythmic tapping, tap, 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 like fingers drumming against wood. I turned in slow motion, my pulse thundering in my ears. At first, I saw nothing, just the trees, the empty road, the creeping dusk. Then, movement. A figure just beyond the tree line, standing perfectly still, watching me. My throat tightened. I couldn't see its face. Only the outline, long and thin, its arms hanging too low at its sides. It didn't move, didn't shift, just stood there, waiting. The tapping sound grew louder. I backed up, one foot slipping on the uneven pavement. My car was still running, the driver's side door hanging open. If I ran now, I could still leave, but then the figure stepped forward, not walked, not ran, just appeared closer than before. I stumbled back, gasping. The tapping stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. Something was very wrong with this place. I turned, lunged into the car, and threw it into reverse. As I sped back down the road, my headlights slashed through the darkness. My hands were shaking. My breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see if it was still there. But as I tore through the night, tires screeching against the cracked asphalt, I noticed something ahead, a road sign. I swallowed hard. It was old, rusted, barely standing. Asterisk, asterisk. Welcome to Arcadia. Asterisk, asterisk. I had never turned around, but somehow I had ended up back at the beginning. I slammed on the brakes. The tires skidded against the cracked pavement, and for a moment I thought the car would fishtail into the trees. But then it lurched to a stop, idling like a nervous animal beneath my shaking hands. The sign stood exactly as I had left it, rusted, half buried in weeds, leaning at a slight angle. I had never turned around. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My breathing was shallow, too fast. The air in the car felt suffocating, thick with something unseen. I checked my GPS, no signal, no map, just a frozen blue dot hovering in a blank gray void. I shifted the car into reverse, slowly rolling back down the road. My headlights cut through the dark, illuminating the twisted branches that clawed at the sky. The silence pressed in, deeper than before. Then I saw something in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow on the road, a dark smudge against the dim glow of my headlights. Then it moved, a shape, tall, thin, impossibly still, standing in the middle of the road, blocking my way. I slammed the car into drive, heart hammering. My mind screamed at me to floor it, to run, but my hands wouldn't move, my body locked up, frozen by some ancient primal instinct. The figure didn't move. Not closer, not away, just standing there as if waiting. I forced myself to blink. It was gone. My breath hitched. I scanned the trees, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Nothing, just the empty road stretching into the night. I swallowed hard and eased my foot onto the gas. The car crept forward, the headlights sweeping the trees. A shape flickered in the corner of my vision. I snapped my head to the side. Nothing. A trick of the light. The exhaustion playing with my head. That's what I told myself. But the feeling in my gut, the creeping chill spreading through my bones, told me otherwise. Something was here. Something was watching. I pressed the gas pedal harder, the car picking up speed. My hands were slick with sweat against the wheel. Then, just ahead, a building. I nearly slammed the brakes again. It was barely visible through the mist rolling in from the trees, but it was there. A gas station. The lights above the pumps flickered, buzzing faintly in the heavy silence. The windows were dark. The old-style sign above the roof was missing a few letters, but I could still read it. Halloway Gas and Grocery. Halloway, one of the towns from the map. I pulled into the lot, cutting the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keys, debating whether to keep the engine running. Then I saw the door. It was open, just a crack, a sliver of darkness, waiting beyond the threshold. I sat there for a long moment, pulse hammering in my ears. I could drive away, pretend I never saw it. But something told me I wouldn't make it far. I took a deep breath, grabbed the map from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the car. The air outside was colder than before, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something sharp and metallic. The gas station loomed before me, its cracked windows reflecting nothing but darkness. I stepped forward, my footfalls muffled by the thick silence. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and something rotten. The aisles were lined with empty shelves, their contents long since scattered or decayed. A faint buzzing came from somewhere deeper in the store. A flickering fluorescent light. I moved cautiously, my footsteps echoing against the tile floor. Then I saw it, the counter just ahead, and the newspaper lying on top of it. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. The date at the top sent a chill through my spine. Asterisk, asterisk. January 17, 198. 1 dot asterisk, asterisk. The day Arcadia disappeared, I reached for it, my hands trembling. And then a sound, soft, close, the rhythmic tap, 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 like fingers drumming against wood, coming from the back of the store. I wasn't alone.